Good morning, everyone, to the Life class on December the 15th, 2024. And we are going to be talking about the topic, why is our negative inner voice so cruel? So, I'd like to address the fact that we are in Advent as we approach the celebration of the birth of our Savior, Jesus Christ, and to reread what Clay quoted in the sermon this morning about the life light, and to recognize that what we are all doing here is to try to do everything that we can to get back to this life light that was originally planted in each one of us, to be aware of the life lights in those around us, to be aware of God's presence around us, because there's way too much darkness within the voices in our heads and in the world around us. And so here goes out of the Gospel of John, the fourth Gospel. The Word was first, the Word present to God, God present to the Word. The Word was God in readiness for God from day one. Everything was created through Him. Nothing, not one thing, came into being without Him. What came into existence was life, and the life was light to live by. The life light blazed out of the darkness. The darkness couldn't put it out. Pretty definitive, huh? The darkness could not put out the light. Well, it doesn't feel like that within ourselves. When our negative voices come after us and paint such a bleak picture of gloom and doom and fear. And if we have people, maybe even in our family or friend group that we're getting ready to go visit for the holidays or be around, that have very negative, critical temperaments, I want to try to give you some practical tools this morning, or within the body of my lesson, 22 reasons why those people might be that way that you might not have thought of. And believe it or not, you might find yourself looking at them in a little bit different way and not taking it personally for the first time. I so wish that I had had this information so many years ago, because I really believed that people said things to me because they were true about me. And now I know it was true about what they thought about themselves, or because those were things that were said to them when they were children. So hang on this morning, and we'll see what we can find out. You know, I had a little flashback as I was putting this lesson together of Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens that had been put into cartoon form when I was a really small girl. This was probably 65 years ago. Do you all recall Mr. Magoo in cartoon form with the Ghost of Christmas Past? Okay, so the Ghost of Christmas Past comes to Mr. Magoo's bedside, and Mr. Magoo is just about the meanest of the mean, and he doesn't even want crippled little tiny Tim to have the Christmas turkey. And I just remember being about 6 years old and thinking, how on earth could anybody be as mean as Mr. Scrooge? This came to me the other day, and my next thought was, well, in just a few years, that would be me being that depriving, that abusive, and that hateful to my own developing little Ann self as I descended into anorexia eating disorders, and critical behavior. I never had that thought before. My own internal, parental, critical voices almost did me in many times during my life. My own inner Scrooge. And I had never thought about it that way. And I still have to watch that. That may sound a little graphic, but watch out for that. Are you your own inner Scrooge? Do you deprive yourselves of joy during Christmas? Or if not, you may have this totally licked, but are you dealing with someone who perhaps deprives themselves of joy and is very difficult to be around? Perhaps you can find your own inner joy in their presence. All right. I did also want to say that last week I was able to spend some time and introduce an out-of-town retreat group that I did to a dear mentor of mine that I've met through this LIFT program. She lives in Ontario, Canada. Her name is Marie Claire. And Marie Claire is a really interesting person because not only is she a retired Olympic athlete, she won all kinds of medals in swimming, but she's totally blind. She's married, has 2 children, and she does incredible healing work with people all over the world. She has lost her sight totally. The thing about Marie Claire is that she finds light in the middle of total darkness. And she helps other people find their inner light in the middle of their emotional darkness. And I've watched her do this because I've been taking this training. We've had people from all over the world. I've observed her working with them. And I told her that I'd always been fascinated with Helen Keller since I was really small. I would see every play on Helen Keller. I would bug my parents to take me to see that. And I've read a lot on Helen Keller, and one of the quotes that I love from her life is this: I have found a magic light, an inner searchlight within me that no matter what gives me hope. And I've latched onto that quote during my own emotionally darkest times. During divorce, during recovery from alcoholism, during deep pain, during death, during grief, during loss. And it's been helpful to other people. So I told Marie, I said, watching you work with people, that you're the closest person actually blind, not deaf, but blind, where I've seen that magic searchlight operate. And so anyway, I just offer those examples to you with this theme of light out of darkness, that it doesn't matter what the circumstances are. And I think that's what Gospel of John wants us to know, that the light always trumps the darkness. So if you just started working with your negative mindset, if you have just started working with patterns within yourself that seem so deeply ingrained, just like Scrooge with a visit from the ghost of Christmas past, we each have the same neuroplastic raw material of the brain. It has been scientifically proven that we can start at any point. It is never, ever too late. So if your mind is telling you it's too late for me as you listen, hogwash. My disclaimer. So we've talked about complex trauma a good bit, where we now understand that it doesn't have to be a big, horrible event. It can be chronic things under the areas of abuse, neglect, abandonment, any kind of isms in the family. We've identified a lot of things from our background. And It can be growing up in a caretaker environment where there's a lot of fault finding, or parental or caretakers that just did not know how to see or hear us in the ways that we needed to be acknowledged. So there is a definition of this that I want to give you with this type of negative critical mindset here. People that are marked by an overall discontent and find fault with just about everything. Kind of an overall discontent. And sometimes you can sense this about people. You know, sometimes people will say, she just can't be pleased. I could just never please him. That sort of thing. And this is where perfectionists come out of. Often it makes very high achievers or perfectionists. So let me give you some examples of how this would work out in a person's life. So a negative critical headspace could be somebody who tends to complain a lot. It could be somebody who expresses this in sarcasm. It could be somebody who blames other people a lot for their problems. It could be that when they meet people, when they're telling you about meeting a person, they just sort of chop them up. They keep looking for the flaws as they tell you about that experience. So they're very commonly known for criticizing or pointing out people's flaws, but sometimes they may have a victim mentality. So they'll say things like, you know, my life is awful, poor me, dwell on the negatives in their lives. I have several people that are working with elderly mothers who have been this way really all of their lives and have just gotten so much worse, you know, as they have aged. Others, when they're in a situation that's new or different, or they feel uncomfortable, there's any kind of a change, they will immediately catastrophize. They'll jump to the worst case scenario, and they go to everything that's terrible. Then there's others who, anytime the phone rings or you see their name, you feel like you just tense. Why? You know it's going to be the latest bad news. You know? And maybe you've worked with somebody who says, well, just don't take that phone call, let it go to voicemail. You know, it's your strategy for a boundary. And you still feel really guilty. You let it go on to voicemail, but you still tighten as you listen to that voicemail. So there are others who will focus on all of the bad news in the social media. They will read all the conspiracy theories. They will think of reports from friends. So it's just this stone, you know, gathering moss, the heat-seeking missile that will get all of the bad news. Everybody knows somebody like this in their life. So think of a person who's in a hurry and nobody is cooperating. So you're driving somewhere and you're in a hurry to get there, but nobody's making that easy for you. So what do you do when you're driving? We've all been in a mood like this. We think everybody in a road is an idiot, just in that, you know, in that particular space. And everybody else is stupid, and you just criticize, and you criticize the city because the mayor's plan is not working and he should already have it in place, and the lights are not timed properly. Negative, negative, negative. And then sometimes if you picture yourself where you're tired or exhausted and you just want a bigger bubble tonight, you just need space, you just feel like everyone is kind of at your throat. Anybody ever been maybe even halfway here? Humor me. Halfway here? Thank you. So what happens if your spouse, your partner, your roommate, your friend, your children They meet you right at the door, and they have a list of things, and they're all talking at once, and they all want to connect with you. Maybe you're not there now, but you have been at some point in your life, okay? And then all of a sudden your phone just starts blowing up with messages, and they all need something. No one's trying to give you anything. That's a foreign concept. They all want to talk to you. And sometime in there you get tireder and tireder, and you think, well, I'm getting really hot thinking about this. You think, oh, they're just selfish. They're not considerate of my needs. And your thoughts just start in this downward spiral. So, that is a common human experience when we get off balance. And we don't have what's called a cushion. I call it a cushion of spiritual fitness. We are just simply, our circuits are overloaded. Normal human thing. So that would be a healthy response to our negative thinking. I am on overload. Let me back off. What do I need to do about this? That would be healthy self-awareness. A non-healthy response would be what a lot of people do, would be to unleash that stream of negative criticism. And we've all been on the end of that, where people have not had healthy ways to cope. And the anger and criticism and negativity has been unleashed on the entire family. So there is a healthy critical and an unhealthy critical. What I call healthy critical, you can think in terms of discernment. I'm going to step back from all of this, and I am going to say, this is not the time to explode, I need about 15 minutes. If you will excuse me, silence the phone, and, you go cool off, you do what you need to do. And it's a lot like how we train our children. You don't trust people just because they're nice. Train them to see past the exterior. See past that niceness. You have this gift called intuition, this gut that sends you messages. Pay attention to the patterns of other people's behavior. Do they actually follow through on what they say they're going to do? Do they show up on time? Did they do it the next time? Pay attention. What is a red flag? What does that really mean? Okay, did they pay you back when you loan them lunch money? That kind of thing. So what we want to do is train the people that we love to see people accurately so that they understand that trust develops slowly over time. We can't always do that. They've got to learn. But we can do our part, and we can sure do it for ourselves, to spare ourselves unnecessary suffering. So discernment is not being fooled by the external. It is seeing past that to an accurate picture of the person. So unhealthy critical, its opposite, is finding fault always with others, not for healthy reasons, but for unhealthy reasons. It's just simply projecting our own, angst onto something out of fear. So it can be used for a good purpose to stay safe, or it can be used for an unhealthy purpose just because we haven't done our own work. So I want to give you, somewhere in here is 22 reasons why people from complex trauma often become negative and critical. And what I want you to really see is that it's not just one or two reasons. It's very complex. There's a lot of payoffs why people do this. There's just a lot of reasons. So if you have somebody in your family or somebody that you're dealing with or somebody in a work situation, you don't have to know just why. You can just know that people are so multifaceted and they've been through they've listened to a lot of voices, they've had a lot of modeling in their life. Maybe they've never had anybody to show them. Maybe they don't know any of this. Maybe they don't know any better. So, to understand what's really important in beginning to identify these reasons, this can become something called a default setting. You know, on your computer, when you set it, you know, it's like, I want you, computer, to do this no matter what. In every situation, unless I totally reset you, computer, you are to do this. Use this printer at this location no matter what. I'm relying on you. So some people only have one setting, their default setting. Now, I've noticed with some people, with anything that I will say, their immediate response is, no, blah, 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 blah. Do you know anybody like that? No, blah, blah, blah. And they're totally unconscious. And they have to. It's almost like they push back. No. Okay? That would be an example. But subconsciously, they don't even realize that they're doing it. And so the first thing to understand about that if they have ever been in an experience of being kind of in constant hypervigilance, constant danger, emotional, spiritual, or psychological danger where they didn't feel safe and they couldn't resolve that. They couldn't do anything about that. You know, it might have been maybe they were the youngest child or home was chaotic. Maybe they were in a family where they didn't get attention, or I know of several like hoarding situations where they didn't have enough a place where they could find, you know, to feel safe. I mean, it could be a variety of situations. The brain is saying, here's the child, here's the brain, and the brain and the child is saying, I got to find a way to protect this child. So what can I do to keep the child safe? Number one, I will look for danger in every situation. So now I will train this person to look for potential problems, to look for potential harm. I'm not wanting this person to see things from an objective, realistic point of view. They need to go in and immediately look for danger. I think of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it may have been The Terminator or another movie where he had this thing implanted in his brain when I first saw that, where he could scan. And I thought, I feel like that. That's what I do. When I go in a room, I scan. I already have one of those. Where did I get it? Because somebody could explode or not like me or shame me, and I got to get there first. And if I get there first and I prevent it from happening, then I can control it. And if I can control it, then it means I won't experience pain. Anybody track with that? So, if you still get hurt all the time, even if you do that, the brain takes it up a notch, and then what it does is say, okay, I can't just look for the obvious danger, like what's going on right now. I must then look for potential danger. So then I must jump to worst case scenario. And that's when it says, it might be dangerous, it might not be dangerous, but I am going to choose that it is dangerous. So I will jump to this. It is bad, even if it is the slightest uncomfortable feeling it is bad, I will jump to a worst case scenario. So the slightest little thing in the body It feels uncomfortable. It's just kind of like coloring it with dark ink. It's bad. So this is an essential survival tool for a child in constant danger, to begin looking for the negative, to train themselves to be negative. This is connected with shame. When a child is in constant danger, often it's because they're abused, they're neglected, they're abandoned, and their emotional needs are not being met. So as this process happens, the child thinks it's their fault, and it's internalized. Are you with me? I'm bad. I must be doing something wrong. I must be bad. I must not be lovable. I must not be valuable. So what would happen with me is that when all of this would be going on, I would absolutely know deep inside that there was something wrong with me that was causing it. Shame spiral. I couldn't differentiate that was another situation separate from me, and that's how shame works. It creates what's called a core identity of shame, that belief that I'm not good enough. And it develops this inner critic in our brain that no matter what you do, you think it's not good enough. It's negative, it's critical. Now, one thing that will happen is if other people pay you a compliment, the inner critic says, well, they don't know the real you, because if they did, they would not say that. And the negative is that voice in your head. This is the cruel, negative inner voice. And the child doesn't want to feel not good enough, not valuable. So here's what the brain does. It looks for ways to create a sense of, but I want to have value. So one of the things the brain then does is to say, if I want to have value, then, well, I will find fault with everybody else. Okay, here's where if you're dealing with a difficult person. So if I can put everybody else down, that will make me feel better about myself. So if you ever wonder how somebody else kind of got that way, why did they put down everybody else? This will give you a train of thought to think, why do they have to be that way? Pick on everybody else. This will give you some enlightenment and understanding. If I can put everybody else down, that'll make me feel better about myself. So now, being critical meets the need of not feeling good enough because I can put everybody else down. So for many people to feel value, their brain goes to, if I am perfect, then people will love me and respect me. So I remember that show. This was on like maybe in the 80s. The Housewives, what was that show? Wasn't the Stepford Wives, it was the Housewives. Huh? Thank you. Desperate Housewives. And there was a character named Bree. Huh? She was the redhead, Julie. Okay. And she was absolutely perfect. The rigid, brittle exterior. And underneath all of her comments were subtle, direct, covert, overt put downs on everyone. And she was the perfect symbol of what I'm talking about here. Completely empty inside, but she so craved love and respect. So this kind of backfires because what happens here, of course nobody can be perfect. So instead of improving the shame, which is what we would hope that it would do, and improving the sense of not having enough value, trying to be perfect actually reinforces the shame. And it creates a greater negative critic. Because now you focus on every time you fail to be perfect, I just can't compete. I can't be perfect. I can't do that. It just becomes your obsession. It becomes this constant thing in your mind. You have to up your game every time. Is that clear? Knowledge is power, understanding how this works in the mind, and coming back to the thing that our brain is meant to be an organ, our servant. We are to be the master. We are not the tail to be wagged by the dog, the brain. It's supposed to be the other way around. We need to commit ourselves to a reversal to bring light out of this darkness. Another purpose that this being negative feels is the child who's neglected, abandoned, or abused has so many needs that aren't being met, but they've also maybe learned as they feel really alone, they can't trust people. They've asked mom, they've asked dad, they've asked the neighbor, they've asked the grandmother, who's maybe where this has come from in the first place, possibly. They're not going to meet the needs. Maybe they reject, maybe they punish, maybe they don't understand, maybe they call you selfish. So a child might say, well, gee, I'm all alone in this. They don't know. I'm just going to have to rely on me. I'm just going to have to trust myself. So remember our talk on manipulation that we had. This is where we learn how to manipulate. So here's one way that I have seen, and you may think of someone in your history. One of the tools for manipulating that somebody can think about is they can think, when I meet a person, I want to find out something really negative or bad about them that I can kind of store away and use as leverage against them. But I can threaten them. I can expose this area of their life. So now I'm looking for flaws in somebody. I want to get some dirt on people. So they can go to a place where, and this is kind of like victim mentality, where somebody can just stay in a place too. I don't choose to change. I just want people to feel sorry for me. So these are two really negative places. You either look for dirt in other people's lives so you can kind of use it against them, or stay rooted in victim mentality. Those are two really unhealthy ways that this works. And a third way is people that have to blame everybody and they never take ownership for their problems. It's always somebody else's fault. That's another type of negative orientation. The fourth type is a tremendous fear of failure. What happens for a lot of people, they go to something new, is the fear that they might fail rises up inside them. So they just want to quit. They don't even want to give it a fair try. They're pretty sure that they will fail. So you get kind of a paralysis within them. So that's really what shame has told them. So finding something wrong with each new project, each new endeavor, and saying if I can find enough wrong things about it, enough negative things, well then I have an excuse to quit. I see that all the time. Or not even start. And then take that a little bit further for some people that goes to the need for change in their life. So I hear this all the time. What I find with people that come for help, or they begin to recognize that there's not an easy fix to what they want to change. The brain says, ooh, I'm going to have to deal with some old wounds that might be painful. I'm going to have to use some new tools that are going to be challenging. Well, I don't want to do that. It's the last thing. Who would want to do that? At least follow me. I'm going to get out of this. So that's when we start hearing things like, I really don't think that you're the person to help me. I really don't think that this method is any good. I've been all over the internet to research you or what you talk about, or then they might start attacking the church, or they might start attacking psychology in general, or they might, you name it. And so before you know you're going down the rabbit hole, you know that this is somebody who's got not the slightest degree of willingness to change at all. And that's a really good way to screen people out that are not interested at all in improving themselves. So let's find something negative to justify me not changing. Another subconscious thing that happens for people is that there's a really good chance that the parents have had a lot of complex trauma in the generation above that. And I know that's something that you know, that you've heard, you've probably worked on, but with this negative critical orientation, it's really hard when that's all that you maybe have listened to in your modeling. You're not even aware that you may have grown up with parents, let's say, who've gone to a social event, and then as children you grew up with them rehashing the event and picking people apart, or going with them somewhere as children, and then they're pointing out all of the things that should have been done and weren't done and so forth. And so you kind of think, well, that's the way that life should be lived, not the things that were positive, or you should be grateful for. That kind of thing may sound like a totally foreign world or planet. So these tapes in our head can become kind of like our internalized parents' voices in our head. And the thing with growing up, the thing with maturity, is to try to identify what are our inner matriarchal and patriarchal voices in our head and separate those from what are our true, authentic voices. I think that's going to be a lifelong task, but I think that part of our suffering is to really identify that and to separate that. And a lot of light comes with banishing that darkness. I think a lot of the things where parents didn't know any better, or maybe they did and shouldn't have said it, those cruel voices, critical voices that are bossing us around today, maybe we should examine some of those things. Another thing I find with many people I deal with is to notice that they get especially, is what they get critical about, what they get negative about. When they meet somebody or watch somebody, the thing that bothers them most. What are the things that bother them the most? And you all have heard about the mechanism of projection, that what bothers us the most about somebody is what we like the least in ourselves. The part that we really hate, the part that we wish wasn't us. Now what we see in someone else triggers an immediate negative critical response. So that's not always true, but to just put it through the filter of, are we projecting our own issue onto that person, is a very useful thing. Again, it's not always true, but look at that. I know that when I have a visceral dislike gut response to a person that sort of defies explanation, if I will take that apart, there's usually something at the bottom of that. Sometimes they're just ugly and nasty and I don't like them for obvious reasons. That's probably not what's going on. But if there is something that's a little bit deeper, I need to follow that. Another way that many people try to solve their shame is, if they can't have a bigger house, if they can't have more money than others, if they can't compete in the appearance or looks arena, if they can't compete in the sports arena, if they can't be better than other people in all of these arenas, then what they do what's left. They go to the morals arena. They go to the religious arena. And so those of us from the church hurt, the religious abuse arena, will find this interesting. So what they say is, so now my self-righteousness is here. I could be more righteous than any of you. So how do I keep this sense of self-righteousness? Well, I'm going to point out all of the ways in which you all are not righteous. I will focus on your moral flaws. So it's necessary to feed a self-righteous attitude. And we've seen a lot of that in our society. There's so much damage. This is absolutely the opposite of what Jesus came for, and you will see in his treatment of the Pharisees and probably everywhere during his ministry that he would have absolutely no part of this. This is indeed part of that darkness. Another thing that happens is that parents can have very unrealistic expectations of their children. So sometimes the phrase, well, you should have known that I wanted that, will come up at some time during childhood or even adulthood. And what that really means is, in other words, they're saying to a child, could have occurred at any point, you should have known to do that. You should have known I wanted that. It's like saying to a child, you know, when you were just a little bitty kid, when you were just playing around, running around, developing, well, you should have just been quiet. You should have had super sight. You shouldn't have even had the ability to be hurt. You know, you should have been immune from all these things. Do you see what a parent can put on a child? Expectations that wouldn't even really fit on an adult. So often we're expected to be superhuman parents when we're just little tykes running around. So these unrealistic expectations can cause parents to constantly be criticizing the child. And illness and addiction and parents who live double lives. Lots of these kind of things. And mental health, depression, anxiety disorders in the home. You know, parents don't really even know what they're doing, but this is the effect that it can have. So another thing some parents in complex trauma want to do is have their children look only to them. They don't have a lot of control, so they feel like if they can be the greatest influence in their children's life, like if I can only do this right, be the greatest power, they want to create this like extra loyalty to them, to the family. And so one of the things that they begin to do, and this can be very subtle, is that if the child starts developing bonds or talking about somebody outside the family, oh, I'm going to Mrs. So-and-so's house, or let's say there's a blended family and they start spending extra time with a stepmother or whatever, that the parent feels threatened, they start to demean or kind of destroy those outside relationships. Like, I want my child to only look to me. They don't want the child to look to anybody else for guidance or friendship, just to talk about things. So there's a pattern of fault finding with friends and other outside healthy relationships. So it sort of becomes a closed, what's called a closed system instead of an open, healthy system. So sadly, that will happen. And then we also have within many complex trauma families, as a solution to shame, we see this a whole lot, not just in the South, but particularly in the South. We have horrible solutions to shame, such as racism, or feeling like better than indigenous people, passing this on to their children. It's absolutely horrific, and we're starting to discover the roots of that and our suffering from that, all in order to feel better about oneself. And these things can pop out, and we're seeing this all over the news. Many in complex trauma had dads who were very angry. Anger was a huge issue, but what did Dad do to justify his anger? Well, he found fault with everything. So it's not my fault I'm angry. Ever hear that one? It's all your fault. So it's not my fault I'm angry. This is outward projection with no ownership. It was justification for the anger. So it's really hard for people who have come from this to begin to develop really healthy friendships and a new support system with trust, because I really think everybody's like this. How could you not? It's really scary because this fear of rejection and abandonment is so deeply ingrained. So what many people start to do when they start to get to know somebody and they go, I really like this person. I like what I see. I should develop a relationship with them. Their brain says, I can't go there. It's too risky. So how do I justify not developing a relationship with this person? I look for faults in that person. I look for all their flaws to justify not developing a friendship. So another purpose for being negative and critical is to justify your own flaws and your own not changing. So if somebody says, you're always inconsiderate or disrespectful, you might respond by saying, well, at least I'm not as bad as them. So because they're worse than me, that means I'm okay, I don't have to change. So you have this comparison thing go on. And it's sad that happens so much, but it does. There's also a critical negative mindset with a person who wants everyone to agree with them, and then feeling if everybody doesn't agree with them, that they take it personally. Have you ever met anybody like that? And that's kind of sad in a way, but it's they're not able to handle conflict really at all very well. And there's also another type of person who feels like that they have to discount the message along with the messenger. Sorry, my phone is dinging all over the place. To shoot the messenger along with the message, just a total put down and a desecration of what it is that they don't like to hear. And also people that really are very resentful of other people's success. When people get promoted, when they get asked to do a job they weren't asked to do. So their way of resenting the success of others is to tear that person down. So within all of that, there's 22 purposes, I promise, that being negative and critical filled in the lives of people that came from complex trauma. So I'm not asking you to count, but just, were there any in there for you? I mean, how many have I used in my life, often without realizing why I did it or seeing how often that I did it? Probably a bunch. So I hope you see how just big of an issue that it can be. But that takes us to the next thing, because being negative and critical is that default setting. And others that you run into will be completely and totally unconscious and unaware that they are doing it. So if you're at a family gathering, or you're not just Christmas but past, and this kind of dialogue is going on, and you realize that you're being triggered by it, I hope that you will remember some of these things and realize that you have the inner light within you, and maybe pull out some of those 35 scriptures I gave you last time to realize that that's what you can bring to the situation in terms of your inherent worth. And you never know, you may have a tremendous impact on that situation. Bless you all for this week, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week.